first time Daniel Roth saw the man in the window, he thought it was a reflection. He was washing his face in the upstairs bathroom of his late father's house, where he'd come to stay after the funeral. The face in the window, pale, rigid, eyes wide open, stared back at him with an expression he couldn't read. Daniel had flinched and turned quickly, only to find the backyard empty, still drenched in fog from the morning chill. The house, a colonial relic hidden deep in a wooded part of Connecticut, had always felt too quiet. But after that moment, it felt like it was listening. Daniel, a former mental health nurse in his late 40s, had seen more than his fair share of disturbed minds. He'd spent over 2 decades in a psychiatric ward, dealing with the most extreme cases. But even with all that experience, nothing prepared him for the slow, creeping fear that began to grow inside him. It wasn't just the face. It was the sounds, the low whispers from the heating vents, the light footsteps echoing in the hallway at night, and the faint, almost imperceptible giggle from inside the walls. His first week in the house passed in a fog of sleep-deprived paranoia. He tried to rationalize it all. Old houses creak. The wind finds strange paths. But on the 7th night, he heard his name, not whispered, but spoken, clear as day, from the dark corner of his bedroom. Daniel! He sat up so fast he knocked over the glass of water on his nightstand. No one was there. That same night, he discovered the cellar door was ajar. It had been locked shut since his arrival. He took a flashlight, descended the old wooden steps, and found nothing but dust, cobwebs, and a single chair in the center. On the chair was an old medical file with a name that chilled him to the bone: Elias Roth. His father. The pages inside weren't just medical history. They were psychiatric evaluations, violent tendencies, paranoid delusions, and one red-stamped word at the bottom: unstable. Daniel tried to dismiss it. His father was always a distant man, prone to erratic behavior, but he never suspected anything this severe. Why had no one ever told him? Why had his father never mentioned his time in psychiatric care? More importantly, what had triggered his mental decline? The next day, Daniel searched the attic. He remembered as a child being told never to go up there. This time, curiosity outweighed fear. Among the dust-covered boxes and rotting insulation, he found an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. It still had a tape in it, labelled Session 12, Elias R. He plugged in a battery and pressed play. At first, static, then the sound of his father's voice. Calm, controlled. They watch me when I sleep. They whisper under the floorboards. They want me to see what they see. Then came the voice of the doctor, asking, "Who are they, Elias?" His father's voice changed then, harsher, frenzied. The hollow ones, the ones without skin. Daniel couldn't shake the recording from his head. He replayed it 3 times. Each time, something new seemed to be there. Another voice, a low growl, or a faint chant in the background. The 3rd time, he heard a whisper that wasn't his father's. "You're next." That night, he didn't sleep. At 3:07 a.m., he heard the doorknob turning. Slowly, deliberately, he jumped up and opened it, but the hallway was empty. Only the smell of smoke lingered. Downstairs, the fireplace was roaring, though he hadn't lit it. Sitting beside the flames was the same chair from the cellar, and on it, the file, now open to a new page. that hadn't been there before. The page bore his own name, dated that week. Now panic set in. Daniel rushed to the phone. Dead. His cell had no signal. He tore through the house, windows locked, doors sealed tight. Then he noticed something that made his blood freeze. The family portraits along the hallway had changed. Where once his father had stood next to his mother, now there was a blurred, featureless figure. The same one from his nightmares. Every night afterward was worse than the last. Daniel began keeping a journal, trying to cling to reality, but even the journal betrayed him. Pages would vanish, words he didn't remember writing would appear, and in the margins, "Stop pretending." His mental state began to erode. He stopped eating. Mirrors became enemies. He covered them, afraid to look at what might be behind his reflection. By the third week, Daniel avoided sleep altogether. His eyes were sunken, hands trembling, voice a rasp. He began to hear his father's voice during the day, arguing with someone unseen. He even saw him, standing in corners, mouthing words that made no sound. The line between past and present, reality and hallucination, thinned. The house, it seemed, was feeding off his descent. One night, he awoke in the attic, curled beside the tape recorder. He had no memory of walking there. The tape was playing again. This time, the doctor's voice was silent. Only Elias spoke. "The madness is not an illness. It's an invitation. They only come for those who can hear." Daniel tried to flee. He packed a bag, got into his car, and the engine wouldn't turn. The road outside the house seemed endless. No matter how far he walked, he returned to the same mailbox, the same cracked stone path. Like the house wouldn't let him go. On the fourth escape attempt, he saw them, in the woods, shapes, watching him, featureless heads, skinless, hollow forms, just like the tape. They stood still, swaying ever so slightly, as if waiting. That night, Daniel set fire to the house. He poured gasoline, lit matches, and watched the flames roar. He stood outside, coughing, crying, laughing. But the next morning, the house was intact. No signs of smoke, no burn marks, no soot. The neighbors, what few he approached, said the house had been empty for decades. When he showed them his ID, they stepped back in fear. Daniel Roth died in a fire 10 years ago, one said. He burned with his father. The house has been condemned since. Daniel returned to the house, if it was even real anymore. He walked room to room, but the furniture was covered in sheets. Dust undisturbed. No fire, no voices, only silence. He sat in the chair in front of the fireplace, clutching the file. It was open to a page labeled Final Observation. Subject unable to distinguish hallucination from reality. Believes himself alive. Displays cyclical delusions consistent with shared psychosis. Signed, Dr. Elias Roth. Now, he only waits. He watches the door, the windows, the mirrors. Sometimes he writes in the journal. Sometimes he tears pages out. And sometimes he just sits and smiles. Because somewhere deep inside, he remembers what his father once said. The mad don't suffer, only the sane do. It all began with a phone call. On a rainy Tuesday evening in late October, I received a message from my cousin Aaron, who worked as a night shift security guard at Pine Grove Psychiatric Hospital in Oregon. His voice, usually calm and even-toned, trembled on the voicemail. "Jack, I think I'm losing my mind, but something's wrong here. Room 6, that room. It's not just another patient, Jack. It's something else. Please, come see it for yourself. I need someone to believe me." Despite how absurd it sounded, I didn't sleep that night. Aaron wasn't the kind to play pranks or exaggerate. We had grown up close, practically like brothers. So, the next morning I took the first flight I could find. I told myself it was probably just stress or sleep deprivation, but deep down, I had a gnawing feeling that whatever I was about to walk into was far worse than anything I could imagine. The Pine Grove facility sat on the outskirts of a quiet town, surrounded by dense evergreens. Its brutalist architecture gave it a cold, lifeless aura, even in daylight. The grey concrete walls, the rusting metal gates, the smell of bleach clinging to the corridors. It all felt like stepping into a relic from a past meant to be forgotten. Aaron met me at the main entrance, looking pale, his eyes bloodshot and sunken. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He hugged me tightly, muttering, "Thank God you came." As we walked through the halls, he didn't say much, just pointed at the surveillance room and showed me footage from room 6. What I saw made my stomach churn. At first glance, the footage showed a middle-aged man in a hospital gown, sitting motionless on a bed. No screaming, no fits of rage, just staring at the camera. But then, every night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., he would smile. The kind of smile that made your skin crawl. Wide, slow, knowing. Then he'd turn his head ever so slightly toward the wall. Not toward the camera, the wall. Aaron fast-forwarded through several nights, all showing the same thing. 3:03 a.m., smile, head turn. And what was even more disturbing, each night, his bed moved a few inches closer to that wall. "We've marked the bed's position," Aaron said, his voice cracking. "Every morning, it's closer. No one enters the room. No one moves it." I demanded to see the room myself. Aaron hesitated but eventually agreed. He handed me a visitor badge and warned, "Don't speak to him. Don't ask questions. Don't stay past 3 a.m. The hallway to room 6 was colder than the rest of the building, like a draft moved through it even with the windows sealed shut. The room itself was empty, clinical. A steel-framed bed, a chair, and a reinforced window. The man, patient Jonathan Meeks, sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded, eyes watching me the moment I entered. He looked ordinary. That was the worst part. There was no madness in his eyes, no visible torment, just stillness. "You came," he said softly. I froze. I hadn't said a word. "You're the third one," he added. "They always send 3 before the wall opens." His voice was calm, almost soothing. I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned to leave, but he spoke again. "Don't come back tonight, or it'll follow you." Back in the surveillance room, I demanded answers. Aaron looked shaken. 2 other guards quit. One tried to cut off his own ears. Said he could hear voices from inside the wall. I asked what was behind the wall. Aaron shook his head. "That room used to be a padded isolation unit. Back in the 60s, there were reports, staff going missing, screams in the hallway. They sealed it up and converted it years ago. But he's the only patient who's ever been assigned to room 6 since then." That night, I hid in the janitor's closet down the hall from room 6. I had to see it for myself. At 2:55 a.m., the building seemed to grow quieter, like everything was holding its breath. I crept toward the room, peeking through the window. At 3:03, Meeks stood, No smile this time, just silence. Then the wall began to bleed. A thin, black stream from the concrete. It dripped onto the floor, spreading unnaturally fast. Meeks pressed his forehead against it and began to whisper in a language I'd never heard. I couldn't move. My limbs felt like stone. The wall didn't crumble. It peeled, like skin from flesh. Behind it, a hollow space. Not a room, not a hallway, just darkness, moving darkness, and then a face, or something resembling one, huge, hollow-eyed. It pressed against the edge, sniffing. Meeks stepped into it. Without hesitation, the wall sealed behind him, leaving no trace. Nothing but the black stain. I ran. I didn't look back. Aaron found me hours later, curled in the staff lounge. "You saw it, didn't you?" I nodded. "We filed no report. We told no one." 2 weeks later, Aaron was gone. No trace. Just his badge on the floor outside room 6. When I returned, room 6 was bricked over, like it had never existed. But sometimes, late at night, I still dream of 303 and that smile. Last month, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a photo, a hospital room, newly renovated, but unmistakably room 6. And in the corner, a patient, not Meeks, me. The date on the photo read next year. It all started with a phone call at 2:46 a.m. Daniel was half asleep, groggy, fumbling around the nightstand for his buzzing phone. When he finally pressed it to his ear, he expected a drunk friend or maybe a wrong number. But what greeted him was silence. Not the static-filled kind, but a thick, eerie quiet, as if whoever was on the line was listening, just listening. He sat up slowly, blinking into the dark, heart tapping irregularly against his ribs. "Hello?" He tried again. Still no reply. Then soft, distant breathing, barely audible. Daniel stared into the blackness of his bedroom, unsure if it was the phone or someone else. Goosebumps formed on his arms. He hung up. For weeks, Daniel had been renting a small apartment above an old tailor's shop on the outskirts of Bristol. It was cheap, half furnished, and came with a leaky faucet he never got around to fixing. But after that night, strange things began to unravel. At first, it was just noises, light tapping on the walls late at night, whispers that faded when he turned his head. He blamed the thin walls, old pipes, maybe a mouse. But then he started finding things moved. His keys weren't where he left them. One morning, he woke up and found the living room window open. He never opened it. Stranger still, taped to the wall beside the kitchen was a torn photo of him. A photo he never remembered taking. He tried to laugh it off at work, mentioning the creepy apartment to his colleague Abby. She gave him a long, hesitant stare before saying, "You live above Chandler's. That place. Didn't someone go mad in that flat years ago? I think there was something in the papers." That night, Daniel searched old news archives online. 1997. Taylor's apartment tragedy. Local man believed he heard voices from walls before disappearance. No body was ever found. The man's name was Oliver Cray. Neighbours claimed he spoke of whispers guiding him. Police said the apartment was covered in words carved into the plaster. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He checked every wall, every closet, every shadow. He even pressed his ear to the cold drywall and waited. Hours passed. Just as he was about to give up, he heard it. A low, almost loving whisper. "We missed you, Oliver." His breath hitched. He stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. The voice had come from inside the wall, not through it, inside it. He stood frozen, pulse racing, until morning broke through the curtains. Sunlight never looked so foreign. Sleep became impossible. His eyes hollowed. The whispers grew more familiar, more insistent. They said his name now. "Daniel, Daniel, come home." He would wake up to find phrases carved into the floorboards. "Return to us. You are one of us. And once. Welcome back, Oliver." He stopped going to work. Abby called once. He didn't answer. He couldn't tell her what he now believed. That he wasn't Daniel anymore. That somehow, in some impossible sick way, the apartment was changing him. On the 7th night, he smashed a section of the wall with a hammer. Behind the drywall was a narrow gap, dark and dust-filled, barely large enough to crawl through. But inside were scratches, deep, desperate scratch marks. And teeth, human teeth, old, brown. Daniel vomited in the sink. The smell of decay had leaked from that tiny crawl space. But worse than the smell was what he saw next. Etched along the wooden frame inside, the words, "Daniel never existed." He left the apartment that night, or tried to. The door wouldn't open. It wasn't locked. It just refused. The key spun. The handle turned, but nothing gave. Even the windows were sealed shut. Glass cold like tombstones. Panic swelled in his throat. He screamed. No one came. Then the TV turned on by itself. Static. And through the static, a voice. Clear this time. No longer whispering. "Stay with us, Oliver. Let the madness in." Daniel began talking to the walls. He didn't remember when exactly. At first, it was to beg them to let him go. Then it was just conversation. His voice echoed in that stale air like it belonged to someone else. He laughed at things no one said, cried at memories he didn't have. One night, he looked in the mirror and said aloud, "My name is Oliver Cray," and it felt right, like putting on a jacket you didn't know was yours. He smiled, and the reflection smiled, before he did. Weeks passed, or maybe months. Time inside the apartment lost all meaning. He painted over the walls. The voices still came. He took sleeping pills. The dreams were worse. He tried to hurt himself. Something stopped him. Something inside him. Then one day, the door opened. Just like that. Sunlight spilled into the room. He stood in the doorway, shaking. But instead of stepping out, he turned and whispered, "Not yet." They found the apartment empty, dusty, silent. Daniel's clothes were neatly folded on the bed. On the wall, carved deep into the plaster, a single phrase repeated over and over. "He is me. I am him. He is me. I am him." No one has rented the apartment since, but sometimes passers-by say they hear a man laughing from the window above the tailor shop, laughing softly, like he just remembered the punchline of a very old joke.